Good morning, folks. This is old Buster coming to you again. Got a little Thanksgiving story here for you. It's not really about Thanksgiving, but it's getting pretty close here since we're in November. The name of this little story is The Cruise. Good morning, Buster, said Bud. How is everybody? Good, good, said Buster. Been busy, I hear, said Buster. Sure enough we have. Jesse and Hiram been helping out since Mr. Hiram called us for a little help on an idea he has. We think we got her down pat, but we all got to get together for a powwow and see how it can all work out. Mr. Holmes said he wanted to get out to office in Washington and wanted to meet y'all and all the families out at your place if and that would work. Well, sure enough, we can do that, but I will check with everybody and all the families and see what all they got going on first. When you want to meet up? Well, Mr. Holmes said to give him a call as soon as you can set it up. Call him on that special line he's got. Okay? Well, I'll get right on it. Well, Buster got the boys together at Leake's drugstore and told them all what they need to do to set up the meeting, and they all said they would talk later on that evening. Jesse said, now, boys, we got to make sure everybody understands this is right important, and we all may need to make some special arrangements to make this work. Well, they got up with each other at Jesse's house and said they had the meeting set for Saturday night, 2 days from now. They'd meet at the airstrip where they had built a heck of a building that would sit at least 100 folks or so. It was close by so folks could fly in and meet there, and it also had several smaller rooms for the youngins to be babysit if need be, and 2 conference rooms as well. Well, Saturday come and everything was set for supper and the meeting. Everybody could fly nowadays, so all a body had to do was to get out the plane and come on in. Refreshments was set out, and Buster made sure all chairs was comfortable for every size body, especially his'n. Well, after everybody got settled in, Mr. Hiram got up and began to tell what he had planned with the leadership of the Presidential Corps and the President. He said Bud, Jesse, and Hiram had been consulted with and helped out a right smart too. Folks, you're going to have to forgive me. Got a little cough drop. I got a rasp in my throat here, so I got to kind of nibble on that thing a little bit. First off, Mr. Hiram said he wanted to get everybody and all the families on board with this plan. There wasn't nothing that couldn't be fixed for any family to be able to go. The Empress of the Sea, the Empress too that is now 300 foot long and has every amenity that could be imagined on it for comfort and defense. Pardon me. You name it, it has it. Plus it runs on seawater with the new technology and the old science from the 1950s. R&D, that's called a research and development, has it absolutely perfected at Area 52. We want all the families to go on a worldwide cruise for up to a year, but it could be extended. Some of our friends may be brung on board from time to time as well. We understand some of y'all will have to leave, but you can do that and come on back. The reason is secrecy and your safety. With a base of operation in the U.S., Australia, Zambia, Iceland, Vanuatu, as well as Snake Island, we should be able to cover the globe. A list of the countries y'all will visit is enclosed in the packets before each of you. We have 30 countries listed so far, but that may be changed depending on circumstances. Why are we doing this, you ask? To form a new country and a new government, because the one we got is not working. Now we are not giving up on America, but building an auxiliary shadow government that is run by trusted patriots. It will be run by the Presidential Corps, period, of which y'all are part of. Y'all all know that we've been through a mess with them crooked politicians, the Illuminati, and apathetic Americans. That is not how this country was founded. God has been taken out of the home, the family, our schools, and our government. We are going to correct that according to our founding fathers and the Constitution. There must be 100% agreement on this now. The only way we can pull this off and keep the Corps family safe is to do it this way, we think. All the details and answers to all your questions will be ironed out in the following days. Each family must make a list of questions you want answered, and we will meet back here in 1 week from today to answer them. In attendance will be the President of the United States, Dalton, Devane, Horace, Alfred, and me. One other person may be here as well, and that is Walter's Uncle Jeff, depending on his admission. Bud will be the captain of the ship, and everybody else will participate somehow or another. Y'all all have different skills, so they will be used. With the money from Four Winds and us here at the Presidential Court, we can pretty near fund anything we want to. We want to outright own our own property and name our new country. We will be fact-finding at all the countries we got listed, and maybe some others as well. What's going to happen is that sooner or later some cockamamie country or the Illuminati will stumble on what we're doing and try to take us out again. That is why we need to be all together. Take a gander at the list of countries and put your thinking caps on for what we need to make a country of our own. Like Arkansas is the only state in the U.S. that could be self-sustaining. It takes a lot to form a new world. Excuse me. Now, y'all are ordered to have some fun whilst gomming and sci-filing around the world. It's an education as well as a good time. Take a little time to try to figure what y'all would like to see and do. All y'all deserve it, and we need you. The countries we picked are Santorini, Hawaii, Samoa, Merida, Mexico, Bahamas, Alaska, St. Kitts and St. Nevis, which is right together, Morocco, Portugal, Ireland, Scotland, England, Iceland, France, Italy, Greece, Czech Republic, and that's Slovakia. You know where our people come from, called Czechoslovakia back then. Fiji, Switzerland, Zambia, Seychelles, Maldives, Thailand, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Vanuatu, Spain, Crete, and Croatia. Well, Mr. Holmes then said, let's eat, and everybody was up for that, that's for sure, especially Buster. Saturday week, all the heads of the families was at the meeting. The young'uns wasn't attending there, no, not this time. The Maws and Paws would deal with them later on. Of course, that wasn't, excuse me, that wasn't going to be no easy chore in some cases with boyfriends and girlfriends. Them courting and spooning is hard to get out of them to be taking care of business, and they don't even consider about what's going on, so we've got to learnate them about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and the sincerity of it all. It's a hard thing to do with young'uns when they in love, you know. Well, Howard spoke up and told them there was enough room for a AW-169 helicopter on the Empress, too. It can carry 10 people, so we can get any family where they need to go within a 510-mile range, and then they can catch an airplane or whatever to where they need to go. We know there are going to be times some of the family members need to get home for business and family matters. But rest assured, the best security will be provided till y'all return to the ship. Questions? Asked Mr. Holmes. Well, Grandpa Gus got up and told them all he spoke for all the families. They had all got together and hashed out everything they could think of, and all of them felt like it was all covered in their packets from last week. Mac said they all felt like they could deal with whatever come up. Big Jim allowed that all the family understood what all had to be done and why. We have come a long way from our Bahama vacation when the boys graduated from high school. Well, Dubs got up and said he was probably the one that balked the most, but he wanted Mr. Holmes and the President to know he and his family supported anything they wanted to do. But you know how it is with young'uns and their courting. Well, everybody sure enough laughed about that, I tell you, and the President said he still remembers when he was young. Just might have to hog-tie some of them, he said. Dub said he sure could do that, but his and young'uns understand what is at stake, especially since all the trouble with the Illuminati that they had. The core families being Buster, Howard, Jesse, and Walter's groups is the backbone of what we are doing, said Mr. Holmes. But others like Steve and Sandra June and all of them in the mansion in Kentucky, as well as Cowboy Bill Kimmel and all the bunch in Australia and our other locations will be included from time to time. Bud's friends in the Caribbean group will be a huge factor in this undertaking for sure. Them folks all believe and do right just like we do. They is loyal to a fault. We want everything to look as normal as possible, and that is one reason there will be travel back and forth to home ground. The president got up and told everybody there that his power and control was limited by Congress and the Supreme Court. We have to circumvent, get round them bozos somehow. Evil and money has broke the back of our country. We have to find a way to eliminate corruption and outside agendas like the Illuminati and the religious fanatics from the Middle East and communist Russia, China, and North Korea. We want to keep from having worldwide destruction. Now, we are setting up meetings with our known and staunch allies in all the countries. Some of them are interested in us making their country the new America. Dalton and Devane can attest to a group that is set up that we would like to have that John Harding and Nick McCarty has with their Monster Island. They are primarily on the West Coast and have operations with some of my cabinet members and agency heads, said the president. So we do have a base of loyal American patriots to springboard us to a successful mission. I hate to admit that lives will be lost and huge sacrifices will have to be made, but with God's help, we will be victorious. There is no time limit, but inroads can be made in a year or so in our estimation. I know y'all will endure for the duration. If we cut off the head of the snake, we can make it all work. Well, everybody stood up and clapped their hands and said, amen to that. With that and a little old McBrayer, they was off to the races. Mr. Holmes and the president called all the men folks and boys along with Dalton and Devane, Horace and Alfred to meeting in a special conference room that was in the building. It was set up so no device could eavesdrop on them. Their homes, the mansion and vehicles and the aircraft and the ships they all had a special place to talk without being spied on. Well, Mr. Hiram gave each man a coin. The president said that they had 100 of them minted at Area 51. They cannot be reproduced. The metal is one that is not found on this earth. It comes from outer space. It takes a special process to even cut the stuff, he said. A nuclear reactor had to mold it into coins. It would not melt the metal, but would only allow it to be molded. Each one of you will have one, and it will tell anyone we send you to that you is the emissary from our group and can be trusted. Y'all will deliver a coin to that person alone in a secure place. At that time, y'all will deliver messages or get them from that person and then report back to Mr. Holmes. Them coins was something else, I tell you. They was a reddish blue, if you could imagine that. You couldn't destroy them any which way you tried, and trying to make one like it couldn't be done. They wouldn't rust, you couldn't bend them, melt them, or break them, or even scratch them. They was absolutely indestructible. In closing his briefing, the president told them all they must keep the coin on your person at all times, and I do mean at all times, no matter what you're doing. Figure it out. Y'all will never get another. Even if you have to swallow it, don't lose it. Boy, that just got them all twitchy. The president then left on out with Mr. Holmes, leaving Dalton and Devane with the boys and menfolk. They began to plan on their next steps of where to go and what to do. Seeing as how the Empress, too, is in Florida, and we ought to pick the closest place to us, don't you think, boys? Well, Dalton said he had the intel on a country that was with us all the way, and we needed to start there in his opinion. It is Dilithium, an island off the Ionian seacoast of Acarnania, Greece. Now, folks, being this pronunciation, some of these words, don't hold me accountable to it. Private owners are asking near about $45 million for the island, but we got to make sure we can be an independent country. Both Jesse and Howard allowed that during their talks with Mr. Holmes and the president that a good name for the new country could be the United Freedom Republic. Y'all put on your thinking caps and see if you can figure anything better than that, and then let's have a settee on it before presenting it to Mr. Holmes and the president. Now, the Prime Minister and President are on our team. That's the Prime Minister and President of Greece now. They got both. Greece is a Greek Orthodox Christian country and a democracy. They have had troubles aplenty and won't change, but the right kind, said Dalton. Well, let's start there and then go from there, said Bud. It will take us about 27 days to get there, depending on the weather and such. When they got to Greece, just Dalton, Buster, Jesse, and Hired met up with the Prime Minister and the President in secret. Walter elected to stay on the ship if and he was needed. Devane had to fly to a hot spot with the spy that had been rooted out from the Illuminati, and then he had to report to Mr. Holmes. Said he ought to be back in there about 3 days. Well, the boys in Dalton met up with the Greek President and Prime Minister and showed them the coins and give each one as well. This was after a little old McBrayer and some full-bodied red wine made from the native grape, Zinamavro. Ouzo it was called, and it is a clear 80-proof alcoholic beverage that is flavored with anise and drunk widely throughout Greece. Well, it didn't have much on old McBrayer or Good White Lightning, I'll tell you that, but they had a little snort of it. Dalton presented their case of setting up headquarters as an independent country on Dilithium Island. The only drawback was getting Greece to let the island go as part of Greece. Now, both the President and the Prime Minister allowed they would get that done immediately from their government. Won't be no problem, especially since your President has given us a concession of canceling our debt to the United States. Well, Jesse spoke up, and with that being said, he would transfer the funds to buy the island as soon as they got back to the ship. Well, they all shook hands a smiling, but all know this was to be kept secret. We're on our way, said Buster, but we got a lot of work to do now. Everybody agreed and said they would be in touch. The President said he knowed the owners of the island, that's the President of Greece, and would seal the deal later on tonight with them. With that notion, they all left on back to the ship. Now, Hired said that was easier than I thought it would be. Well, Dalton said the President and Mr. Holmes paid the way for the deal to be made. Well, let's give the news to everybody at supper tonight and let them know we is in it to win it now. Well, Dalton said to Jesse to make sure all the dealings went through Four Winds Ventures, LLC. We can make changes later on. I will see to it that $50 million will be transferred to your bank account tomorrow. They had a good supper on the Empress too and discussed the plan moving forwards. Everybody felt good about all that and getting it done. Later on, Buster was woke up near about 3 a.m. He went up on the bridge and seed Bud and told him it was sure enough a gully washer and if anything was wrong. No, says Bud, we just come across the tail end of a tropical storm and we will be out of it in a couple of hours. Then it would be clear sailing to port. You know, Bud said, You know, Bud, said Buster, I just don't cotton to anything making me woozy, and that's real life for me, too. I'd rather take a beating than be dizzy. I don't ride none of them roller coasters and upside twirly things or none of that now. I just ain't going to do it. I'll let you know if and we is going to run into weather, Buster, so don't you fret none. To be honest with you, Bud, I couldn't stay in the bed, but more so I wanted to sit with you for a spell. We've been put in the fat in the fire, and I just wanted to tell you that if and this is more than you bargained for, I would talk to Mr. Holmes about getting you out of it. I feel like your welfare is my responsibility, since I was the one that brung you in with us boys. Buster, I have to admit this has turned out to be bigger than I thought, but I wouldn't change a thing no matter what happens. If a man has one true friend in his life, he is surely blessed. I got all the boys in the presidential court to boot, and I know they would give their life for me and my family. But I want you to know, you will always have a special place in my heart. Well, I feel the same way, Bud, even if we didn't grow up together. I just know the good Lord put me and you together at that there train station. I want you to meet up with Julian and Black Kettle and don't be a scared. I want you to get your rope and pen and be inducted into the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers. We have a bunch more folks for you to meet, and some things that will sure enough make your hair curl as well. You might think you're crazy, but it will be all true. Don't never doubt it. There is a passel of blessings in what we are doing, but there is a hard road to hoe as well. Not to worry, Buster. I will follow your lead through thick and thin, said Bud, and danged if Buster didn't give Bud a big old bear hug. Come morning after breakfast, the meeting was held to let everybody know about the Lithium Island. The plan was to see all the islands they could from where they was and the Caribbean at Phillips and Sandrine's house in Martinique. The plan was to see as many islands as they could before meeting up with the Caribbean group in Martinique. Well, they done just that, but it took a mite longer than they planned. But they was sailing the Empress too, and others such as the President, J.P. Berger, and others of their group was flying in. Fact was, they hit Martinique twice before meeting up with everybody. Well, all of the group met on the Empress too and went over all that they had done, what they had to do, and what has happened since they all got together and started the United Freedom Republic. Everything was set in motion and work was already started on the UFR infrastructure on the Lithium Island. Dalton said there was only 10 more islands to visit, and the boys would report on their activities and what all was agreed on with the leaders of each island. Seems to me all is coming along like me hoped it would, said the President. With the support of all the islands and governments we have assurances from, we ought to have a new government in a year or so. Our trip and tour of the 10 islands we have to visit should be completed in 4 to 6 months. Jesse, Howard is doing all the aerial recon and drones, helicopters, and planes to get the lay of the land of UFR and other areas we have interest in. His report ought to be completed by next month. Underwater recon is also being done with Hired, Horace, and Alfred. Dalton and Devane give a report for defense, and that was something that UFR would dearly need. Too many enemies to count, you know, said Devane. Really, our biggest concern is the Illuminati, and we are preparing for them, said Mr. Holmes. The President had a lot to say, and not all good. The country was going downhill and fast with all Illuminati congressmen that was paid off. The far-left liberals are in power now, and I will not be re-elected, said the President. We have to make hay whilst we can. The military is my big concern. They stand with the new President in Congress of the United States we know is gone. We are going to fight at every step of the way. In other words, we got to get the United Freedom Republic up and running fast. Dealing with the chore, with getting all the details worked out for the UFR seemed like a never-ending task, but everybody was up for it. Lots of wheeling and dealing, I tell you. Funny thing was the Illuminati wasn't raising their ugly head at us. Reckon they figured they got us out of the way, and we had our tail between our legs. Of course, that wouldn't do, or so. In the meantime, before the last island was visited in Australia, Cowboy Bill Kimmel called up the boys and said he had an opportunity to buy an 80,000-acre ranch in Montana known as the Broken T Ranch. It would be bought and paid for by Four Winds, but ownership would be by the United Freedom Republic. It would never be able to be traced to the UFR by transaction of shell companies and other entities. This would give the UFR a foothold in the United States that would be off the grid and run by the boys and the Presidential Corps. This property would never be sold again, and only folks approved by the boys could live there. All houses would be made of bamboo logs, believe it or not, almost indestructible, and our architects and designers said they would resemble real log structures. Power would be natural, provided by water, wind, and the sun, and in some cases geothermal. Access to the headquarters would be through a tunnel in the mountain. And you folks that want this thing and that want the written story, you can see a picture of it, and it's a real-life picture of this ranch. Bill said there was fail-safe procedures in place and 3 emergency escape exits provided by water, air, and land. The ranch was self-sustaining with pretty near anything a body would want for a happy and fulfilled life. Security included several drones that patrolled the perimeter night and day. They was equipped with lasers that could kill or disable. Remote sensors would be in place very soon to detect motion, and cameras was set up throughout the ranch. The security center will be manned night and day as well. The security crew will be handpicked by Dalton and Devane from our most elite warriors and assassins and other experts. With this being said, the same will be done on all our locations. What we got now are the tunnel-boring machines the Air Force uses with high-speed rail system to get to one location to another, all underground. That will be operating in the coming months. Fellers, one last thing. We got to be prepared for an attack by you-know-who. Our armament includes missiles and the latest warfare weapons. Dalton, Devane, and Hired are up to speed on all that along with Mr. Holmes. Mr. Holmes said 52 of the coins has been given out so far. A special vault will be built on the Lithium Island to keep the remaining coins safe. Well, we need to get to it, said Buster. Well, Dalton stood up and said there was one last thing that him and Devane wanted. What's that, said Jesse. We want to make a training center out on the ranch for our men. We have to be in top shape, ready for anything. We sure enough got the room, said Cowboy Bill. Y'all just take a gander around the place and pick a spot. Mr. Holmes spoke up and said the Presidential Corps would take care of that, and then the President said he would assist in any way he could as well. The meeting adjourned and everybody let a shuck. Work was to be done. 1 year later, the Lithium Island hosted a worldwide press conference proclaiming a new country, the United Freedom Republic. There was a worldwide uproar for sure. Some good, some bad, but it was done. The good outweighed the bad, though, and was a blessing. President Connors was out of office now, and him and Mr. Holmes nominated Leonard Banks for the first president of the United Freedom Republic. President Connors would be the vice president. Others would be announced in the following days. The United States was sure enough a mess, I tell you. The liberal left put the country in bankruptcy, and race riots was everywhere now. The Chinese, especially along with the Illuminati, was in the process of taking over the U.S. The USA had lost its standing in the world, and the defense was at a level ripe for a takeover. The countries with sense rallied around the United Freedom Republic, and war was sure enough on the horizon. Dalton and Devane and their teams took out the Chinese leaders with their assassins and let moderate conservatives take over China. The Illuminati was another matter, though. The Illuminati attacked the Lithium Island, the Broken T Ranch, Australia, and other outposts of the UFR, but were repelled. The biggest battle was at the ranch, though. Russia decided they didn't have a dog in the fight and let well enough alone. North Korea was another matter, though. It didn't take much to rid their leaders from this earth, and North and South Korea united as just Korea. There was a happy bunch of folks, I tell you. Leonard and Vice President Connors was in touch with the U.S. leadership and was trying to work a way to salvage the country. The liberals and socialists and other screwballs didn't want none of it, but the military stood with the UFR. Assassin teams made light work of all the bad guys, politicians, and left-wing fruitcakes. Change was a-coming. Conservative leadership was put in office, and the Constitution was being upheld and defended. God was being put back in the homes, schools, and government. The U.S. took the idea to defend its borders with drones, finish the wall, bring in more border patrol, tear down all mosques, deport everybody that did not defend the USA, and learn English. No other flag was to be raised over Old Glory, and no politician was above the law. Lots of other changes was being made, but some was slow. We all came from somewhere, but we was all Americans. No such thing as African, American, just American. Plain old American. If you was born here, you're an American. The UFR was close held, just like it was set up to be. If a body didn't agree, they could leave. It said 100% agreement, but complying to the principles of the government of the UFR was a must. John Harding and Nick McCarty and their group come for a visit at the ranch and the Lithium Island. Also at the gathering was the Caribbean group led by Philip and J.P. Berger and Sharktooth. There was memorable visits, and their folks and ours blended well. It wasn't long before two groups was doing everything together, both in leadership and values. The United States now had two strong allies to bring about change in leadership. True, there was a lot of dissension and fighting, but it was coming around to do right or leave. Ms. Brown come on board with the UFR as well, and her role in government and the USA. Another year later, the boys, along with the UFR, the Presidential Corps, the Caribbean Group, and the Harding-McCarty California Group, known as the Coalition, was having a big powwow at the ranch when the Illuminati decided to make a last-ditch effort to eliminate the boys and the other flies in their ointment. Brother, they come with all they got, but surprise, surprise, the Coalition was ready for them. All of the clowns from the cartels, paid-off U.S. politicians, and Illuminati thought they had us pinned down. They had another thought coming. In fact, Cowboy Bill had it fixed where the attackers was herded and boxed in like a bunch of wild horns in a boxed-in canyon. Black Kettle and the Cheyenne dog soldiers with Julian wreaked havoc on them scoundrels as well. There was fighting in the skies over the ranch with lasers, missiles, and fighter jets and ground defenses that decimated all of the Illuminati troops. Relatives of the Meyer clan, along with the members of the 13 original families of the Illuminati, cartel ringleaders, and hired guns of the extreme left liberals, was taken to task and executed on the spot. Now, the honchos not there on the attack on the ranch was rooted out by teams led by Nick McCarty, John Harding, Sharktooth, and Devane. Dalton stayed at the ranch. Jeff stayed at Dilithium Island. Cowboy Bill went back to Australia, and Steve headed up the mansion and defense force of the Tiptons and the McBrayers. When all was said and done, no more Illuminati to worry about, and the USA had a chance at trying to do right one more time. How you say? Honest men in elected positions and only expenses paid and no perks. No lobbyists, no PACs. God was put back in homes, schools, and government. All borders was closed. Illegals was deported, and all Muslims sent home or shot as terrorists, and all mosques razed. All of them had armories. Looked like the world just might be on the mend, but nobody fooled themselves. Evil would always be around. After all the fighting and putting out fires, the Coalition met up again at the ranch for a good time. There was old McBrayer flowing freely and more to eat than a body could imagine. There was a big dance and country singers invited to perform as well. All the families gathered round and made new friends and long-lasting relationships. The women folk had a get-together, and the men folk sat by the fireside with old McBrayer and cigars. That is, the ones that smoked and like a little hair of the dog. The Coalition brung together factions of like mind and the ability, resources, and determination to have a free and godly world. Plus, with all the different locations in the world, they had a safe place to vacation. Also, it sure seemed like they all got along and liked each other as well, especially the young'uns. Hard looked up in the starlit sky and told all the fellers to look what was a-comin'. Now, some of them men folks liked to drop their teeth, I'll tell you. Of course, the boys and Mr. Holmes knowed what was up. Out of nowhere stood Admiral Hannibal Patton Coulter with some sidekicks of Julian and Black Kettle. First off, Black Kettle called out Nick, John, and Sharktooth and presented them with their pens and sashes. Julian told them a ceremony would be given later on to be ready. They just stood there goggle-eyed like a deer in the headlights. Admiral Coulter said that the Intergalactic Federation knowed what all had been happening, and representatives would be invited to meet with them soon. Buster said, "Boys, y'all are now in the big leagues. Just go with the flow." And then he began to tell the story about the general. All the menfolk had questions of flying about like a bunch of bees. The only one that didn't was Sharktooth, and him with a smile on his face. Buster spoke up and said, "A new day is coming, and all God's children say amen." Well, each one of the men bowed their heads and said, "Amen and amen." P.S. Well, I reckon y'all is a-wondering about Bud. Well, he and his people come in for the festivities and had a high old time. Then they left on out for a little sail on the Empress too. Whilst Bud was a-gomming around them 30 islands, he see something he wanted to check out. A storm sank the Flor de la Mar during the night of 20 November 1511 off of to me a point in the kingdom of Aru, Sumatra with $2 billion worth of treasure. Bud thought he found it. Whilst Bud was asleep in his and captain quarters, Black Kettle and Julian come to him. They had a little settee with Bud and told him he was getting his sash and pin. Black Kettle told him he would let him know when the ceremony in the Snake Lodge was to be taking place. Now old Bud was just plumb gobsmacked, and he called Buster about all this. Buster told him not to be scared and to go where they told him. This is one of the greatest honors you could get. So long, Bud. Hope you find the treasure. Hold the line, Bud. Hold the line. What in tarnation is Buster bellering about? Bud asked himself. Hold the line? Y'all have a blessed day now. It's old Buster signing out. Thank you for listening.